Okay, welcome to day 3 and 4 of our trip down the Gulf Coast of Florida on SV Unspoken. Up until this point, we've been doing a lot of motor sailing because there just hasn't been enough wind to keep us on schedule. Fortunately, that changed, and now we have enough wind to keep us on pace, but it also came with some quite annoying chop that we're going dead into, as you can see here in the video. For this entire sail, we seem to have a wave period of about 2 to 3 seconds, and if you don't know what a wave period is, that's the amount of time that passes between the top of one wave to the top of the next wave for you. And for us, this happened to be the perfectly wrong wave period, which resulted in this up and down hobby horse motion, just non-stop, all day long, up and down, up and down. And thanks to this hobby horse motion, we actually did get a little bit queasy during different parts of the day. Not that we didn't get fully seasick, but it was enough to just make you uncomfortable, really. Now, there's going to be some monohull lovers out there who are going to point out that for the price you're going to pay for a catamaran like Unspoken, you could easily get a monohull that's 10 to 15 feet longer, no problem. And the idea there being the longer boat is just not going to experience the same oscillation kind of effect that you get on the shorter catamarans. So there is a slight edge there for longer monohulls, at least when it comes to waves hitting you, head on.
So, we're sailing.
This is day 3 of our passage.
The engines are finally off.
Yeah, we're actually sailing now. We've been motor sailing for the past few days because the wind has been either non-existent or uncooperative. There's a crab pot. Hold this. But we're moving 6.5 knots, 13 knots of wind. We're going right into it. We have to kind of point a little high. As you can see up ahead, we're going to have to tack soon. We're trying to just skirt this peninsula because after it, there's nothing but clear water for a long time.
Last night we anchored and slept at the anchor for the first time. Not much to say about it. It was pretty peaceful.
Because our entire day was about 70 miles of upwind sailing, it meant that we were beating into the waves all day. But our way to counteract this was we chose the tack that had the waves least head on, and that helps mitigate the rocking motion a bit. But it was actually a really nice day of sailing. After playing with the trim a little bit, we got her up to an average speed of about 7 knots, and every now and then we'd actually get over 8 knots. So we made a good clip all day long. Also, we learned something that may be worth sharing for other newbies out there. So every now and then when we'd tack, we would go in the direction that was more into the waves. And when we did, our boat speed actually slowed down to about 5.5 knots, which was a knot and a half to 2 knots of average speed slowdown. And the reason is just because the waves were slowing us down. This is something we never realized before, that going straight into the waves could actually have that significant of an effect of the speed of your boat. For lunch, Mike and Lauren made ceviche, which if you've never had before is really just raw fish that's been cooked with the acid of lemon and lime juice, and it's really, really tasty, and they made some of the best tasting ceviche we've ever had. Another thing that was a learning experience now that we were actually getting to sail for a full day was how to use the traveler on a catamaran. A traveler on a catamaran is huge. This one's at least like 12 or 15 feet long or something. And on a monohull, you primarily just use the main sheet for adjusting, the position of your boom, and the traveler is just kind of an afterthought. But on a catamaran, you can use the traveler to move the boom very far in either direction and then still keep your main sheet tight if you want to. So playing with how to properly trim a catamaran was definitely something new for us. We made it to San Marco Island right as the sun was setting. Shortly thereafter, we went ashore to have dinner at a place called the Snook Inn, and then came back to the boat, and then we did our pre-departure chores that evening so it'd be easier to leave in the morning, and in this case, it was checking the engine, which Mike had just taught us how to do.
Checking the sail drive oil.
Looks good. Now I have to check the oil for the generator. The strainer for the generator. Looks pretty good. There's no big seaweeds or anything in it. I like the outdoor engines, like in this access. I know some people say, well, if you can't fix it underway, but I don't want to have to pull up the bed to get to the engine compartments and stuff like that. That's just a pain, and it makes the inside smell weird, and you have to have extra protection and thermal blankets and blah blah blah. So I like this.
Get that to the camera.
I've had to crawl into the engine compartment in bigger seas, and it was no problem, even though it's in the back like that. You're inside the lifelines, pop it open, and once you're inside the compartment working, you got plenty of space to move around, so it works out.
We woke up the next morning and started to head out, and that front that had been chasing us the previous day had passed through the night, and while the winds were no longer bad, it had kicked up a bunch of steepish and largish waves that we were running into as we were going out the channel. From checking the weather, we learned that there was a small craft advisory out, but we decided to make a go of it and see how it was for us. So the waves were much larger than the previous day, and they were still quite steep. As a matter of fact, a number of times the waves went under us, we heard our propellers come out of the water on the back. So it was an uncomfortable ride. We got splashed a lot, and we decided that since we knew that the small craft advisory was ending at noon, so we just turn around, hang out in the safe anchorage, and just run chores until noon hit. Turning around and going back in was also interesting because now we had the waves pushing us, and we did actually surf down the waves a few times, which, is somewhat disconcerting in that large of a vessel as compared to a surfboard. So after re-anchoring and after breakfast, we decided to take London to shore to stretch our legs some. And this was cool for us because it allowed us to kind of play house at what it would be like to have a dog while we were cruising. And it was also our first solo dinghy ride. After dropping London back off at the boat, we went fuel dock hunting because the dinghy was starting to run low. We successfully found the fuel dock, which was broken, so we actually had to fill it up out of a hose out of the back of a petrol truck, but we did it, and then we did a little bit of bird watching. We also took the opportunity to explore this sandbar that had popped up thanks to low tide not too far from the stern of Unspoken. On this sandbar beach, there was actually a ton of conch shells that had just popped up, live conch shells, and there were some starfish to boot. The paddle back to Unspoken was actually a little bit tricky because there was wind and current against us. So, and I've said this before, we're not really the best at stand-up paddleboarding, and yeah, we had a little bit of a mishap. So once we got back and cleaned up, we headed out for the second time that day, and this time the waves were more manageable. They were still large, but they weren't as steep, and the period between them was longer. So we were able to push our way out and then turn along the coast, and when we did that, the waves were hitting us on our beam instead of from in front, and the ride actually smoothed out a lot. And in this case, if you were in a monohull, you would have probably been rolling a lot thanks to the waves hitting you on the beam, but the Cat did just absolutely stunning. So because we left at noon, we only had a half day's worth of sailing to get in. And because we were on a beam reach most of the time, we actually made really good time and did about 50 miles before nightfall. And the sail itself was rather uneventful other than dodging tons and tons of crab pots. We did actually lose cell service about halfway through, but this was expected. But it's also kind of sobering when you lose a cell service because you realize that your own safety is really in your hands when you're out there on the water. So that evening we pulled into a spot called Turkey Key in the Everglades, and we were the only boat there. We had the entire anchorage to ourselves, and by now we were thoroughly on sailor's hours, waking up in the morning and being tired shortly after sunset. So we had a nice and easy spaghetti dinner, and then we all turned in for the night immediately after, because the next day, which will be our next video, we had a long sail, our longest sail yet, from the Everglades to Key West. That's it for this episode. Stay tuned for the aforementioned next episode, and if you're curious about supporting us in our journey to travel around the world via sailboat, you can check out our Patreon page here, or you can do a one-time donation on our website, which is linked below. And we've also set up a page where we're selling t-shirts and other merchandise that we're hand making in order to earn some more funds for our travels. The link is below in the description, but most importantly, thumbs up if you liked this video, and if you're new here, please consider subscribing.